I will be sharing my slides and yeah. So time restricted meal and diabetes.
Can you put it on slideshow, please?
Yeah, it is in slideshow. It is in slideshow. It is in slideshow, madam.
So she means that you you put it on the slide. It's right now in the slide sorter form. You'll have to put it on slideshow mode.
It is already in slideshow mode.
It's not showing here, sir.
Okay, so I have to, what I will do, I will make it again. That will take some time. Stop sharing and sharing it again. Fine. Now it is?
Yeah.
Okay, fine.
Thank you, sir.
So time restricted meal and diabetes I will be talking about. And I'm thankful to the organizers for giving this opportunity to talk about the particular thing which I love much. And time restricted meal, I'm also practicing myself and in my patients as well. So before going directly to the time restricted meal, I will be giving a slight introduction about the circadian rhythm. Because as mentioned by the madam that I'm interested in circadian rhythms and the Society of Chronomedicine. So the circadian rhythms are physical, mental and behavioral changes that follow a 24-hour cycle. And we all know that they are because of the genetic constitution and also because of the interplay of the various hormones. These natural processes respond primarily to the light and dark and affect most living things. And some cues are also there, and food is one important cue, not only the light. Chronobiology is the study of circadian rhythm, and that is why we will talk about it. And this is about the functions of the various peripheral clocks. We know that we have central clock at the suprachiasmatic nucleus, and we have the peripheral clocks. And these peripheral clocks follow the rhythm of central clock. And what we have in various body mechanism, they are the interplay of the central and peripheral clock. All these peripheral clocks make our body, our physiological mechanism into action. And because of that, various physiological conditions and pathological conditions arise. That is my firm belief. And the master clock we know is the central clock, controlling and regulating the circadian rhythm is located in the suprachiasmatic nucleus, which works in tandem with the peripheral clock. And because of that, most physiological mechanisms are regulated. And what circadian rhythm we are seeing is because of that. So you see, one example is given here. Light goes to eye by the retinothalamic tract, goes to suprachiasmatic nucleus. And from there, we can have various behaviors: sleep-wake behavior, feeding behavior, autonomic nervous system, cortisol, melatonin, two important hormones, but other hormones, growth hormone and other hormones are also there. And we very well know that example of growth hormone is very important here. We know that growth hormone is secreted during night time only. And because of that, a newborn child requires 18 hours sleep, because only during night and during the sleep time, the growth hormone is secreted in pulsatile manner. Similarly, the body temperature is also regulated by that, and all of them go to the peripheral clock in pancreas, gut, muscle, liver, white adipose tissue, and brown adipose tissue. And because of that, various metabolic activities we have. So now coming to the practical application of this concept of chronobiology. I told about the chronobiology, why this chronobiology is important. And my belief is that, which has a lot of evidence, that most of the disease we have today, especially metabolic disease, are nothing just circadian dysregulation. When circadian regulation is attained again, then everything can be cured. And for the metabolic disease, the most important thing is that if we can give rest to liver, at least 12 to 14 hours rest to liver, then everything can become normal. So the concept of chronobiology, applying it in the dietary composition and calorie level, they are the key factors affecting aging and age-related disease. Dietary restriction promotes metabolic and cellular changes, and that can affect oxidative damage, inflammation, optimizing energy metabolism, and enhance cellular protection. Fasting, the most extreme form of the dietary restriction, which entails the abstinence from all food but not water, can be applied in a chronic manner as intermittent fasting or periodically as cycles of prolonged fasting are lasting 2 or more days. So it can vary in different applications, but mostly it will be doing the challenge to fasting physiology. So basically what we have, the rhythm of the fasting versus fed physiology. And what we have to do, we have to challenge the fasting physiology, then various metabolic good effects can be seen. In rodents, it was found that intermittent fasting can promote protection against diabetes, cancer, heart disease, and neurodegeneration. This gave us idea that most of the diseases can be controlled. And because of that, we thought that probably we can apply it to the human beings as well. And because of that, in humans, the intermittent fasting and less severe regimens like the consumption of approximately 500 kilocalories per day or the 2 days a week fasting, all these were applied and they showed the beneficial effects on insulin, glucose, C-reactive protein, and blood pressure. That was shown. The time-restricted meal intake is not a diet. It is rather a pattern of eating. And it involves period of eating and period of fasting. Two of the most popular type of intermittent fasting are the 5:2 fast and time-restricted feeding fast, and the 5 versus 2 fast. It is the 5:2 diet, the fast diet. It calls for eating normally 5 days a week and then restricting calories 500 calories per day for women and 600 calories per day for men on other 2 days. So 5 days, they follow the normal rhythm or normal calorie intake, and 2 days, they restrict calorie. This is called as 5 versus 2. Time-restricted feeding involves eating food with a narrow window. This is another thing. It is not 5:2. Eating food in a narrow window of time, typically a 6 to 8 4 window, but 6 to 8 hour window. But it 6 to 8 hour window during the night time, the food should not be taken. So that is the restriction in that. And then fasting the remaining 16 to 18 hours a day. These 16 to 18 hours a day in 24 hours, which are fasting, they should be more or less during night time. Research shows that this type of fasting is more manageable because most of the fasting period is overnight and into the morning. So it can be managed easily by most of our patients and even normal individuals. So flipping the metabolic switch, the fasting physiology. Fasting involves a radical change in cellular physiology and metabolism. And that radical change, which is occurring at the cell level and affecting the metabolism, is basically important. Blood glucose normally provides the body with sufficient energy through glycolysis. We all know that. And during a fast, maintenance of blood glucose levels initially release upon glycogen store. We know that glycogen stores in our liver are enough for more than 12 hours. And skeletal muscles are only for that particular muscle and they can work for even long, but they are restricted to only that particular muscle while the glycogen in the liver is for whole body. Glycogen is made up of chains of polymerized glucose monosaccharides that are used for energy by the process of glycogenolysis. So glycogen can be converted into glucose by glycogenolysis. And we know that this is the method of the most of the time getting glucose during the time of fasting. Ketone bodies made from free fatty acid through the process of ketogenesis. These ketone bodies travel through the body and are reconverted back into acetyl coenzyme A at the tissue requiring energy, famous Cori cycle. And in addition to adipose catabolism, protein catabolism through the process of gluconeogenesis simultaneously takes place in times of fasting. That is why this fasting period becomes very important. And gluconeogenesis produces glucose from amino acid broken down from various tissues, including muscle. After glycogen stores become depleted, the dependence of body tissue for glucose gradually declines as ketone bodies become more readily available. So when ketone bodies are making a part of our energy substrate, then a lot of changes are occurring. And if you go into the basic mechanism of SGLT2 inhibitors, they also do something like that. They provide the free fatty acids as the energy substrate rather than the glucose, which is the energy substrate for the muscle. So different types of eating patterns can be there. TRF are the time-restricted feeding pattern, which I was talking about, taking food intake to a specific time period of the day, and typically between 8 and 12 hours each day. Within that window, everything should be taken. And after that, we can observe the fast of more than 12 hours. So intermittent fasting is that this eating pattern involves fasting for varying period of time, typically for 12 hours or longer. And calorie restricted meal, this is the eating pattern involving a continuous reduction in calorie intake without malnutrition. And alternate day fasting is another method. In this eating pattern involves consuming no calorie on fasting day and alternate fasting days with a day of unrestricted food intake or a feast day. So the fast day and feast day alternatively. Alternate day modified fasting is another method. This eating pattern involves consuming less than 25% of the baseline energy needs on fasting days, alternate with a day of unrestricted food intake or a feast day. And then comes the periodic fasting. In periodic fasting, the eating pattern consists of fasting only 1 to 2 days per week and consuming food ad libitum on 5 to 6 days per week. So all these research started beginning in the rats, and then in the human being, this were tried, and we have varied data, and we have data to show that in beginning, especially the time restricted feeding is very, very useful. I agree that after some time, the effect weans off and the control in the weight is not that great, but the glucose control still remains very nice. So major cellular and molecular responses of various organ systems in intermittent fasting. This is very important because one should know whether the one fear in mind of most of the patients and even doctors, they ask me that you are advising intermittent fasting to diabetic individuals, they can go into hypoglycemia. But my answer is that I don't advise this in the same way to all patients. This should be individualized and also keeping in mind whether patient is receiving insulin or is receiving sulfonylurea. If these two hypoglycemic agents are not being taken, then you can go freely for intermittent fasting. And my 30 years of success story is that my most of patients follow this and the drugs have gone down and their blood glucose control is excellent and their weight is also good. So I was telling the major cellular and molecular responses at the brain level, it improves cognition and neurotropic factor production and synaptic plasticity increases, mitochondrial biogenesis and resistance to injury and disease becomes high. In blood, elevated ketone levels reduce glucose, insulin and leptin levels, and elevated adiponectin levels reduce inflammatory cytokines, reduce markers of oxidative stress. And in the cardiovascular system, it reduces blood pressure, reduce resting heart rate, increase the parasympathetic tone, and stress resistance goes up. In liver, basically very important, glycogen depletion, ketone production, increase insulin sensitivity, and reduced lipid accumulation. And in adipose tissue, lipolysis, reduced leptin production, and reduced inflammation. In intestines, enhanced motility and reduced inflammation. This again favors enhanced motility and reduced inflammation. In muscle, increased insulin sensitivity, enhanced efficiency, endurance, and reducing inflammation. So it shows various anti-inflammatory properties. At present, I'm working in a project in which I'm trying this to the patients of fatty liver. So postprandial physiology, postprandial glucose level, everybody knows the dependent of risk factor for cardiovascular disease, and it exerts effects greater than glucose level at fasting state, whereas the increase in serum triglyceride level under both fasting and prandial condition contributes to development of arteriosclerosis. And we know that this increase in TG level are important in postprandial condition, are important for endothelial dysfunction. And we know that insulin resistance is a prevailing cause of abnormalities in post-absorptive excretion of blood glucose, and excess fat deposition renders a vicious cycle of hyperglycemia and hypertriglyceridemia, creating a lot of problems. So this all we know. So this can be altered by applying the intermittent fasting. We know that blood glucose and lipid regulation is very finely tuned, and I think I need not to detail all this because this August gathering knows all these minute details, what happens after meal, pancreatic beta cell release insulin, and then we know that that inhibits hepatic gluconeogenesis and glycogenolysis. And what is the action of insulin? I need not to tell to this audience. Then the GLP-1 suppressed inappropriate glucagon secretion from pancreatic alpha cells. And we know that nutrients from gastrointestinal tract, muscle, and adipose tissue, such as glucose, amino acid, and glycerol, which are energy resource of the body, introduced into the liver. And in insulin resistance state, overproduction of triglyceride is there. And we all know that in uncontrolled diabetic individual, we see a lot of TG levels are very high. And this increase in TG level is contributing to hypertriglyceridemia, which is related indirectly to atherosclerotic progression through increase in small dense LDL and lowered HDL. So these two things which you are worried about, increasing LDL, small dense, and lowering HDL, is definitely related to high triglyceride levels. So lipids becomes very important, and intermittent fast, this time restricted meal has been able to decrease the lipid levels and also to address this lipidemia. This is a profile of the patient over 48 hours in individuals with a typical American eating pattern and two different intermittent fasting eating patterns. They are shown here. The switch never flipped in typical American pattern. See here, the switch never flipped. Always the more glucose. And you see that in switch, this flipping is occurring at several days each week, and it is very common, 18 hours of fasting every day. So you see in between, there's a lot of flipping is occurring and ketones become high in between. So this makes the fasting physiology dominant, and dominating the fasting physiology and the ratio of fasting and prandial physiology, challenging the fasting physiology, is good for the metabolic diseases. So now I will talk about effects of time-restricted meal intake on insulin sensitivity. Insulin hormone is exerting the metabolic flexibility by regulating fat and glucose switching, and after extended duration of fasting, lipolysis starts in fat tissues and metabolism shifts from lipid synthesis to mobilization of fat as a form of fatty acid derived ketones, which can be expected to reduce fat mass and improve insulin resistance. This can happen. And the irregularities in metabolic flexibility and resulting insulin resistance may be initiated due to irregularity in adipose tissue metabolism, and that can be corrected by the time-restricted meal. Preclinical studies in animal model has already shown that, and we are now having a lot of literature available on human beings as well. Most of the organ system respond to TRM by overcoming the challenges and then subsequently restoring the homeostasis. In beginning, there is some challenges put, and then the challenge to homeostasis makes the metabolic adaptation, and that metabolic adaptation is in favor of controlling diabetes and weight. Impact of circadian and behavioral pattern of glycemic control can be very well seen, and this you can see very well in this coming slide, that the beta cell functions and the this can even change the beta cell functions, and the can go from dysglycemia to normoglycemia by addressing the insulin sensitivity when we have the better a better tolerance of glucose, and this all can occur because of the time-restricted meal. Here, the time of day dependent patterns of circulating hormone level, and these hormone level, we know that all these hormones have a circadian pattern. And when we switch to time restricted meal, then these circadian patterns are maintained, well maintained, and even during the inactive phase or resting phase, the insulin secretion goes down and the cortisol secretion does not occur, and melatonin secretion is maintained. So all these things are maintained by having the time-restricted meal, and because of the effect of these hormones, the favorable metabolic effects are seen. Now I will talk about some evidences, and this particular trial I'm referring upon, this was a randomized trial among patients with diabetes, and the follow-up was for 12 months that revealed 65% of TRM group and 40% non-TRM group had normal A1C after 12 months. The A1C in TRM group had a significant p-value. A p-value of 0.0001 was observed in comparing the values of blood sugar in TRM group from the first visit and second follow-up. This work was done basically in KGMU itself, and one PhD student was working on this particular aspect, and whatever data I'm presenting, it belongs to her, and I was the chief guide for that. Highly significant results were obtained in the case of fasting and postprandial values of blood sugar in TRM group when compared to the control group. But all these patients were not on insulin. They were on OHAs. Preferably, they were having other OHAs, and some were also having sulfonylureas. The lipid profile of patients in the TRM group showed significant improvement when compared to patients in the control group. A single intervention was all that was done in the TRM group, which was that dinner time was kept at 7 p.m. for TRM group. This was followed by for a minimum of 5 days a week. 1 day was left for them to go at libitum. Dinner time in the control group was any time after 7 p.m. Normal Indian diet of pulses, chapati, rice, vegetable, consumed in North Indians most of the time was allowed. And within the Indian population, time-restricted meal intake in diabetic patients shows promise, and its effect are worth exploring further. We need more studies to have the final say, but whatever I have done, I'm presenting here. So time-restricted meal intake can be used as a therapeutic intervention against metabolic diseases. Lot of metabolic diseases, not only diabetes, also into metabolic syndrome, hypertension, fatty liver, and other problems related to that. Time-restricted meal intake is effective as a method for weight loss, and significant changes were observed in hip size and waist size in type 2 diabetic patients, and because we also measure the anthropometry. TRM ameliorates metabolic fitness and counters hypercholesteremia, and restricted meal intake can be used and adjunct in the patient of type 2 diabetes, along with the standard treatment, conventional treatment protocol. Of course, more monitoring is required initially when we are observing this. So take-home message is that postprandial glycemia contributes more than fasting glycemia to A1C, as we know, and that is why we have to address more about the postprandial hyperglycemia. Furthermore, such good glycemic control can be achieved in middle-aged, otherwise healthy patients with type 2 diabetes without concomitant weight gain or severe hypoglycemia, when both fasting and prandial hyperglycemia are targeted as part of a comprehensive program. So if the A1C goal cannot be attained despite optimal control of fasting glycemia, special attention should be paid to monitoring or treating postprandial hyperglycemia. That's what we do most of the time. So because of that, the feeding habits misaligned with circadian clock are shown here, and feeding habits which are aligning to circadian clock are shown on the right side. And you can see here that we presume that all these changes in the metabolic disease can occur, and we can address obesity, cardiovascular diseases, and diabetes by making changes, desired changes in the feeding habits. And one of that is time-restricted meal. But again, I will say here that it should be individualized. We cannot have a common formula for all of them. So with this, I will like to end here. That is about my talk.